I'm Frank Ryan. I'm state representative of the 101st District, Lebanon County, Pennsylvania. And with me today is a dear friend of mine, Jim Rodkey from the Pennsylvania Property Rights Association, Al Ciardi, who's a bankruptcy expert and attorney from Philadelphia with the firm of Ciardi and Ciardi, and Blake Ringenberg, who's a psychologist who has been working extensively and helped us tremendously in some of the psychological issues that are affecting people involved with the property taxes. I'm going to talk about the bill a little bit, and then what I'm going to do is go into some of the details about why this came out. But I want to start with this comment. I've been spending an entire lifetime of keeping organizations out of bankruptcy. That's what I do for a living. I'm a CPA. I'm an expert in economic warfare. I have never seen a more complicated problem to try to resolve and eliminate than the problems with eliminating school property taxes. I will tell you though, if we fail to bring this to fruition, the issues that will take place in about 12 years for our Commonwealth will be insurmountable, and we will regret the fact that we did not act today. So let me describe a little bit about the bill. It's House Bill 13 for the 13 original colonies. It's called the School Property Tax Elimination Act. What it does is it calls for a 100% elimination of all school property taxes. Some of the issues that I want you to be aware of is that we've created, as a result of having over 200 meetings with the different groups that were opposed to other property tax elimination proposals, we wanted to create some of those items to overcome those obstacles. And what that creation of that system is a 1.85% local personal income tax that gets added to your 3.07%. We are increasing a local sales tax, an additional 2% that gets added to the 6%, but that will remain typically locally. And I'll leave that to questions so we can go into some of the nuances and the details. And then there'll be no tax on Social Security. And this is probably the one that has generated the most interest, is I'm proposing, as a senior, a retirement tax on retirement income of 4.92%, which is the 3.07% of the current personal income tax and 1.85% that will be local, to help retain local control. As we get into some of the nuances, I do want you to be aware of there are certain critical risks that I think you need to be cognizant of. And one of those critical risks is the unfunded pension obligations. And that unfunded pension obligation has caused payroll additions at the school district to go from about 1.85% 20 years ago to 34.29% now. So 34% of every payroll dollar in the school district goes to pay down the unfunded pension obligations. You know, I've only been in the legislature for a couple of years. And one thing I can tell you with certainty, I'm incredibly impressed with our current leadership team. Most of them were not here when these problems came about. And this is one of the most difficult problems to solve because the playing field is so unstable due to things such as hold harmless agreements, fair funding formulas. The fact, as I just found out from bond counsel, that the property taxes of your property has been pledged as security for school bonds. And I think you need to be cognizant of that. You need to be cognizant of the fact that if a school district is unable to pay its obligations, the unfunded pension obligations under a cost-sharing program will be allocated to the other 499 school districts. We are all in this together. And as I get ready to introduce Jim Rodkey, I want to just make this one comment to you. People in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we are but one life event away from losing your home. That's wrong. When I ran 2 years ago, I said, this is a major issue. I want to get it resolved. When I saw the fact that it was so difficult to bring up, I said, let's try to do something creative. Let's see if we can find a way to have a shared system where we can finally kill this unbelievably onerous tax. Without getting rid of this tax, let me just make one comment. Without taking your home away as collateral by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the school districts, there is no way to get the spending under control. With that, let me introduce you to my dear friend, someone who's been with me this entire time, is Jim Rodkey, and then we'll introduce the other speakers as well, and then take questions. Jim.
As Frank said, my name's Jim Rodkey. I'm with the Pennsylvania Property Rights Association. Nowhere is there to be found a tax that is more morally reprehensible, regressive, or unfair. Regardless of the great progress that we've made concerning justice in our society, here we are in a whole new millennium, still clinging to a system of taxation that is rooted in the tyranny of European feudal systems, where property owners are seen simply as serfs and a tax collector's serfdom. After all this time, we are still living in this society where we rent the right to stay in our homes from a government that was supposed to be designed to protect our rights to acquire, possess, and protect property, just as Article 1, Section 1 of the Commonwealth Constitution is supposed to demand. It is a system of taxation that has absolutely no basis in ability to pay, but begins with an arbitrarily determined value attached to our homes that may or may not, and most likely will not, be based on the actual value of our homes and property. In fact, in previous studies, it's been estimated that as many as 64% of all properties are overassessed, meaning that those property owners are paying property taxes on property that they do not physically own. And yet we hear people calling the property tax system fair, just, and stable. When a tax is the ability to throw you out of your own home because you can't keep up with the demands of the tax collector, where a long-term illness or injury, a recession, a temporary job loss, or a death of a spouse, and these are just a few of the life events that can lead to losing our homes. And when it happens, there is the greatest possibility that your home will be sold on auction for pennies on the dollar with no just consideration to the property owner. The concept of just compensation, according to Article 1, Section 10 in our Constitution, is not even considered. It's just conveniently thrown out the window when it comes to property taxation. It simply doesn't matter. Also, we can maintain these government serfdoms. I'm not a serf. My home should not be treated as the tax collector's collateral. My labor and industry in securing a shelter, a place for my family that we call our home, is not to be exploited. Protecting the right of pursuing, acquiring, and protecting property is supposed to mean that our government is protecting these rights to us as citizens of this Commonwealth. It is not supposed to mean protecting the government's rights to pursue, acquire, and possess our homes. Quite frankly, not a single person holding an office in this building who has not taken the oath of office to uphold the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and it's time we recognized that the property tax is violating that Constitution. There are some good people up here trying to do exactly that, and I'm proud to stand with Representative Frank Ryan as he tries to honor and respect that oath in the protection to our rights to our homes and property. I want to throw out a simple question to you. Following the economic recession of 2007 and 2008, when home values plummeted, did assessed value drop accordingly? Were there any school districts out there who were scrambling to reassess property in respect to those new, lower home values? Was there anything in place at all that protected the property owners during this very difficult time? We not only didn't see our assessed values drop, we saw our property taxes increase during this time, and people were struggling to hold on to their jobs or find new jobs because of the recession, while at the same time cutting back and doing without so they could try to keep up in holding on to their homes while faced with increasing school property taxes. In those very difficult times, as people had to cut back, it prevented them from making purchases, from purchasing goods and services in this Commonwealth. And because of that, it made the recession harder to come back off of. The economy has to recover, and when you're preventing people from being able to do that, the economy cannot recover. But that was the past. What about the future? At the current rate of growth, in just about 18 years, property tax burden in this Commonwealth will double. In another 7 to 8, it will triple from its current rates. And somehow we're being told that this is sustainable, that it is fair, and worst of all, in my opinion, that it is somehow just. You know, the house that my wife and I call our home has been in existence since the mid-1800s. And during that time, it has been taxed and taxed and taxed again. Our homes are the only things that are taxed and taxed until the tax actually exceeds the actual worth of the thing being taxed. And still somehow we cling to this notion that this is fair. The property tax certainly impacts our senior population, but don't be fooled into thinking this is just a senior problem. Far from it. We have an out-migration problem where the largest percentage of that out-migration are young people, young working families looking for better places to raise their families. In essence, we're ripping families apart all to maintain this onerous tax as our children and our grandchildren are fleeing Pennsylvania, looking for a better place to call home. Places that aren't punishing the business community with an egregious tax that is hurting job growth and job creation. Places that aren't making it harder to establish roots in a community through home ownership, and places that aren't forcing low-income renters into overcrowded housing as the property tax increases the burden of rent on those same families. In the end, this is just a glimpse at why I support complete elimination and only complete elimination of the school property tax. And when we get that done, we're coming after the county and municipal property taxes because I don't simply despise the property tax because of the financial burden it places on so many people. I despise the tax because it is morally reprehensible, and it is unconscionable to me that we would continue to allow ourselves to be shackled to this regressive and egregious system of taxation. Certainly, we have to find the replacement revenue to make this happen, and however we do that, it has to be as fair as law will allow and is as humanly possible. Fair, however, is not demanding complete elimination for yourself with an absolute unwillingness to contribute to the replacement revenue. We all have to have skin in this game. I'm 63 years old, and I've paid taxes my entire life. But the thing is, I do want to see property taxes eliminated, but I don't want it done by pushing that burden onto my children, my grandchildren, and on future generations. It's simply immoral to my way of thinking. We can and we should do better for ourselves, our families, our neighbors, our communities, our schools, and for future generations. So I'm here to say school property tax elimination and only elimination, no more Band-Aids. Thank you.
The next person I want to introduce is my dear friend Al Ciardi. Al and I spent a great deal of time working in the bankruptcy arena and helping to specialize in keeping organizations out of bankruptcy. And if we had to go into bankruptcy, Al's firm would deal with that. I've seen in the research that I've done in the Commonwealth a tremendous misunderstanding about whether or not a state, a school district, a county, or whatever can go bankrupt. I would have thought that after the bankruptcy in Harrisburg, we would have understood what that meant. But the underlying risks, it's called circular flow of income in economics, is of such a nature that one of these issues comes undone, it becomes a death spiral that can't be fixed. I want to knock out for you the myth that this doesn't affect each and every one of us to not address our financial problems head on. In my years of doing these works, and I've been in 7 nations in my life that have collapsed economically, and all I would remind you is we were told in 2006 and 2007 that the federal government backed up the Federal Home Loan Bank Board, the mortgages, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and we found out in 2008 that was not true. We were told that General Motors was too big to fail. We found out that was not true. Iceland has gone bankrupt. Do I predict that happening to us? No, I don't, because unfortunately for the citizens of Illinois, they will go bankrupt first, and we will learn a lesson for them. We have 3 to 5 years to make unbelievably difficult decisions to solve these problems to avoid a catastrophe in 12 years. And at the end of this, I will give you an example about why and what those issues will be. So I'd like to introduce, without further ado, my good friend Al Ciardi.
Thank you. I will probably speak the briefest of everybody, but I really speak only to the issue that Frank just raised, and that is all I do all day long is represent companies that are frankly blessed with the ignorance of not knowing when they are going to hit the wall. Frank has been trying over the last several years to demonstrate to the state and its divisions and its municipalities that the wall is approaching ever quicker and it is ever bigger. And with the reform bill that is being presented and a equalization and a knowledge of all of the issues that will go with how we not only fund things, but what we then use them to fund and how that is spent, and how that addresses the tremendous unfunded pension liability of the state. It's allowing the state to try to address these concerns before we hit that wall. So instead of being the General Motors and needing to file the bankruptcy, maybe we're the Ford that avoids it and ends up stronger on the other side. So with that, back to you, Frank.
Al, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, the last speaker, then we'll come back and do a quick wrap up and I'll ask any questions, is Blake Ringenberg reached out to me about a month ago. And he said, Frank, I'd really like to tell you about the support I have for this concept and tell you about my practice area and the trauma that this has on families. And so I was really intrigued, and I've been unbelievably impressed with his capabilities. But I often tell people, when we were talking this morning, I said, you know, there's an interesting perspective because I've been dealing in that my entire life. My dad died when I was 3 years old. My mom had 5 children. My youngest sister was 6 months old when my dad died. And we struggled financially. And I often tell people my mom was my first workout client, and it structured and impacted how I did the rest of my life. This is really serious, and I'd like Blake to come up and show you and discuss with you that this is not just about the impact of property taxes on seniors, but it's an impact on property taxes on every Pennsylvanian. Blake.
All righty. If we look around the room today, we see a lot of adults. We don't see many kids. That's the one population that's not being represented very well here today. And that's who I work with, is children. So when I reached out to Frank, it was because I was seeing a theme with kids having what they call adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, due to losing their home. So my job as a clinician is to look at the etiology of the pathology, meaning where is behavior coming from in our kids. It might represent as ADHD, conduct disorder, ODD, but many times it's trauma. The best way to mess up a kid's development is to take away his primary secure attachments to his environment. You know, that is the root that keeps the tree growing for many kids, to kind of speak in Rogerian terms a bit. It is imperative, in my opinion, that we don't add to the trauma that kids go through. And this is something that I've experienced in my practice. You know, kid gets bullied at school, he comes home, he wants a safe place to say this is his home. But he might be in jeopardy of losing that home, and I've experienced that, and it's very sad to have that conversation with them. It's almost like making the kids of Pennsylvania live the movie Inside Out, sort of. I think we can do better than that. The adverse childhood experiences, if you haven't looked into that, there's good research on that online. But if a kid has a score of 4 or higher on the ACEs, he's 12 times more likely to commit suicide. You know? Why would we want to add to that? Why would we want to put another number on that ACEs assessment by taking away a kid's home? I don't understand that. And when trauma affects a kid, it breaks the lens as to how they see reality in the future. And this is the future fabric of Pennsylvania, is the kids. So why do we want them to look through the lenses of mistrust and just wondering when the rug is going to get pulled out from under them? I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea for our future. And the other thing that I'm noticing, because I work with a lot of young men, there's a bit of a failure identity or a learned helplessness that can be developed when they don't believe they can actually step into the realm of home ownership, which creates a extended adolescence for many young men. So you have young men living in the basement because they don't have the resources necessary to step out and buy their own home, to individuate and become autonomous young men, that can, lead strong families. So my basic contention here is that trauma affects the brains of kids. It puts them in a perpetual fight, flight, or freeze response. It produces adrenaline, cortisol, and norepinephrine that makes it hard for them to sit down and do a math problem, to do their homework well. When a kid is living in a traumatized region of his brain, when he goes back to the amygdala fear response area and he is then asked to go to school, be polite, do his homework, and so forth, it's very difficult for them. So when we mess with the kid's secure attachment, when we mess with his environment, we are messing with many areas in this kid's life and this kid's development. So I would say we do everything we can to make sure that a kid can come home from school, he had a rough day at school, he knows that he can have a safe place to go to. We're not going to take his home and all the attachments that he has with family and so forth there. We're not going to mess with that. That's a sacred place that we don't touch. So that would be my hope from a mental health perspective, that we work on helping kids feel safe and secure in their environment to give them the best opportunity to grow. Thank you.
Great, thank you. As I get ready to take questions, let me just make a couple quick comments. This problem is serious. It's been bantered about for a long, long time. The day of easy solutions are gone. They were gone probably 10 to 15 years ago. Shifting the tax burden away from one group and putting it on another group exacerbates the flight out of the Commonwealth of young working families. Because of the uniformity clause in Pennsylvania, I'm prohibited from doing certain things. As an example, I might have wanted to have eliminated the first $25,000 of retirement income, but I can't do that under the uniformity clause. There are a lot of other constraints because I happen to believe that I am bound by the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the Constitution of the United States. I swore that oath of allegiance as a United States Marine. I will tell you as well that the days of being able to kick this down the corner are long gone. But if we don't act, let me tell you what will happen. The wall, as Al said, is fast approaching. We're headed to it. There will become a point in time in which we cannot turn away from it. The most controversial part of what I'm proposing is about the taxation of retirement income. I can appreciate that same trauma that Blake describes for younger people exists for older people as well. It's that uncertainty. It is. I get that. I've been poor. I understand what that's like. I tried to protect as many people as I could. So before I take questions, let me just say this. As I did with the 200 groups and people that I met with in the design of the bill, I'm also doing this as an open comment period, and I've gotten some great comments. In about another 3 or 4 days, we're releasing the words from the LRB, Legislative Reference Bureau, about some fixes that we have to make it better. And I'll be going throughout the state to try to sell this idea. Because let me say this clearly as I can. This entire solution to getting rid of property taxes lies with senior citizens. If you don't get behind the bill, it will never be introduced, it will never be moved forward, and you will be fighting this property tax battle for the next 348 years, well after I'm gone. With that, any questions you might have? Absolutely. And by the way, for those that are with the press, we give you a press packet that gives you all the factual circumstances behind all the critical risk factors for you to look at. But I'll give you an example to answer your question specifically. We have a provision that if a school district, it's a 100% elimination, including the retained debt. If a school district is unable to pay its existing bills, it goes under receivership with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania called Act 6A. That receivership then will direct the repayment of the bills, and the process by which that's done under a normal bankruptcy provision, which is called Act 6A, which is equivalent to Chapter 9 in the Bankruptcy Code for school districts. And Brad, what this thing will do is we've got a 3-year hold harmless, so that school districts have the opportunity to get acclimated to this. After that point, school districts that are not remaining to be financially viable will be encouraged by the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the executive branch to consider merging their operations to finally start attacking the cost drivers. And that's the reason behind the bill. The debt goes away, there's no property tax. Really important. I found in my doing this, citizens and I think it goes back to a number of measures, citizens don't trust after the casino fiasco, we're going to get property tax elimination with that. They don't necessarily believe, and when I get people really scream about what I'm proposing, they said, yeah, but what's the next step? You might have all the honorable intentions in the world, but how's this going to be used against me? And that's a fair question. So in my bill, it specifically states, any school district that attempts to put a property tax back in, their funding is terminated and they'll have to be absorbed under an Act 6A and then merge with another school district. This lack of trust in government is real, it's palpable. William Penn and I discussed that when we landed in the New World.
State taxpayers would have to basically cover the debt of the school districts?
No, what would happen is they would go under Act 6A, and then they would look at the spending within that particular school district the way it's done now. Very similar to what's going on in Harrisburg as we speak. Harrisburg's under that type of receiver, and the solutions are done internally within that school district. First of all, no Social Security is being taxed. Second of all, on retirement income, any money that you've put into the plan itself, in other words, employee contributions, is not taxable because you did not get a tax deduction when it put in. I had a question that came up earlier. So what if I can't track my basis? Most people tracking the basis of what they put in was fairly easy, but some there's not. So in the revision that's coming out, we're putting a 15% hold harmless if you can't track your basis that says absent knowing what your basis is, if you contributed to your plan, we're assuming 15% is not taxable. If you can prove it was a bigger number, you get to deduct that. So it's the earnings on your retirement assets that are in fact taxed. Pension would be taxed. 401k would be taxed. Roth IRA would be, excluding the money you put in yourself. By the way, for those that don't know, I'm a CPA as well. So I'm happy to get as technical as you might want me to on the tax code, as long as you promise not to fall asleep when I do it. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. No, this is so controversial. This is a bill where I think from an economic perspective, it's been unbelievably well constructed. And I've not wanted to put anybody on this, knowing how politically sensitive this is, I can't think of anybody other than a 68-year-old sophomore representative who can be willing to bring this up and talk about it. I had over 50 meetings with focus groups along the way, including seniors. So like in my own district, they all knew I was going to be doing this. But obviously, there's been some adverse reaction throughout the state, and it's incumbent upon me to go out and do that. So I'm not putting anybody else at risk on this. But again, I have talked to a significant number of groups to get the ideas and get their perspective on it. And we have some members of the people I met with here in the process. Well, I'm sorry, Jane had a question before I go back. Right, so as an example, I'm proposing a 2% local sales tax on food and clothing, not on anything else. So it's not the first 6%, so it's a local sales tax option only. And that's really quite candidly to spread the cost of this to people who are using the resources as well. So there's a shared common interest in the process. And I want to be honest with you, one of the problems that came up, and this is actually what triggered it. School property taxes are increasing at a rate of $500 million a year. Let me say that again, $500 million per year. I will tell you, if we don't resolve this problem this session, it's not going to end. So that was actually the balancing factor, Jan, and I felt there was no other way to do it in the process. And by getting rid of the home as a collateral, we then allow us to start attacking the cost drivers, which I'm happy to go into a detailed discussion. And one last comment on this. I would view this as Bill 1 of 8. There are 8 other packages to help us get the spending under control. I'm the prime sponsor of some of them. Some of them are already in the Senate, and leadership has already been very responsive to those. This issue, I'm taking the discussion, personally. Then Ford, you had a question, and I think you had a question as well. Ford. Two things on that. First and foremost, the feedback that we're getting from seniors is about 50-50. And I would have expected that 50% are on Social Security only, and so they're saying this is a good deal. The other 50% are people who've got a pension. But then when people start calculating the numbers, it's different. This is not going to be an easy sell. You and I have had some interesting discussions about that. It's controversial. It's never been done before. And I appreciate that. And I want to make a comment to you because it's important, and I'll go to your second question. Never would I have designed a system from scratch like the bill I'm proposing, but I didn't design the system that's failing that I have to fix. If I'm going into this to try to level it, we've got an entire segment of the state that doesn't care if you ever get rid of property taxes. The entire western half doesn't care. And so when you look at that issue, that's a major concern for us. We've got other areas. When I started to find that the number of people who are renters, like under my bill, we have to address the renters' cost of passing it through. 44% of Pennsylvanians rent. So that's a big number to have them shoulder the cost and the tax increase. The other aspect that became a really big issue, the cost of caring for us seniors, and I am one, is pretty significant, and last year went up to $11.2 billion, of which $3.9 billion came out of the general fund. And somebody says, no, the lottery fund takes care of it. The lottery fund takes care of about 14% of the cost of caring for seniors, and as the baby boomers, of which I am one, keep hitting that number, the number of the cost of caring for seniors is growing up, and younger people are saying, I'm not doing this anymore. I am getting some fairly strong support from younger people, as I would expect, although the increase in the tax rate for them as well is something that's got people concerned. Going back to the issue, does it force consolidation? There is no more an ability except through the earned income tax for a school district to raise funds other than to reduce its spending. So yes, it is likely to cause in 5 years or more a consolidation of school districts. We have 500 school districts in Pennsylvania. Maybe you had a question as well. Sure. That's a great question. Not that the other ones were not, by the way. This is probably the one that's the most painful. I've paid taxes my entire life. I get that. But my costs don't go away to my community because I'm older. I was on a hospital board of directors for 28 years. 75% of cost of seniors 75% of healthcare costs take place in the last 12 months of life. This is a major issue. The state right now is the bailout for those families that can't do it. We have old age and senior citizen centers in every community, and we need to protect those folks. When I hear some comments from people, one person made a comment to me and said, Under your proposal, I think it's a dumb idea. I'm going to pay $5,000 in tax on my retirement income. And one of the people that was watching that said, that means you have a retirement income of $100,000. And I'm not here to make value judgments on that. People worked for that. But when I'm doing a public process, that cost out of the general fund a year ago was $2.4 billion to care for seniors. The cost this year is $3.9 billion. But there's a bigger reason why seniors, I felt, had to come to the table. The total property taxes being paid by people that are seniors is $3.4 billion per year. Under my bill, the 4.92% generates $1.4 billion. Seniors save $2 billion on property taxes compared to income taxes. But I will be honest with you, higher income seniors will pay more. You know, I came here and I didn't take a state pension for a reason. I owned my own business. I will be paying this tax myself. And my option is to go to one of the other 42 states that also tax retirement income, or one of the 13 states that tax Social Security. Or do I want to stay in the community where I love, because I love Pennsylvania. I'm an adopted son from Maryland. I love being here in Pennsylvania. This is our only way to do this. And guys, I got to tell you something. I'm publishing something this week. It's called Generational Divide. The absolute disdain that people have for the different generations is sad. I can't fix that with any bill. But I can tell you, having served in Iraq and Afghanistan with some unbelievably capable young people, they're pretty good people. I've met some significant seniors as well that are pretty good people. We're all in this together. None of us created it. Jim.
I just want to add something. Let's stop kidding ourselves. You don't pay your property tax with your house. Your house isn't generating the revenue to pay that property tax. You're paying that property tax with your income. For a retiree, you're paying the property tax out of your retiree income, so it's already a tax on your retirement. We're saying, let's make it a tax you can actually see, that's based on ability to pay, where everybody is going to pay the same rate. We're going to have a fair system, a flat tax system through this, and that's what we're saying. And in the long run, seniors are going to save money. We keep saying seniors. We have to understand, we have a lot of retirees in this state who have retired in their mid-50s. You know, not everybody is 65 and older, but it's already a tax on your retirement. You're already paying that. You know, for a working family, you're paying it out of the revenue you generate from your labor and industry. In the business model, they're paying that from the revenue generated from the business. It isn't a tax on a building, it's a tax on people and the income they generate.
That's a great. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take one more question, then what we'll do, if anybody wants to stick around and ask detailed questions, I'm happy to do it. And Jen, I hope if you don't mind, I'll put you on the spot. Jane's been really good about coming and saying, give me some more details about this. This entire packet is designed to ask you, to be able to ask questions. I would encourage you to do that. My time is your time. I intend to go around the state and try to sell this idea so that it's shared pain. Anyone, one last question we want to do, then we'll move on. Sir. I've gotten some feedback, nothing official, but I will tell you, PASBO has come out against my bill. It's Pennsylvania school board officials has come out against my bill. There are other groups that were negative on other prior efforts that are leaning to being neutral at this point, but they obviously want to see the final draft of the language. The superintendents I've talked to, it's been a mixed situation. Half are saying, I think I can live with this. Half are nervous. And I would expect if you're not nervous, you should be, because I met with a group from PASBO, and here's what they said to me. And I get this, by the way, this is not a criticism. They said, Frank, in our world, revenue equals expenses. So whatever revenue I've got, I'm going to find a way to spend. And that's why we can't get this under control, because right now your home is the checkbook that's being used to be able to allow that to happen. Let me just read this one comment to you. The school district has irrevocably pledged its full faith, credit, and taxing authority, which taxing power includes the power to levy ad valorem taxes on all taxable property within the school district. If that doesn't scare you, nothing will. This system will never be fixed. Spending will never be brought under control until we do that. Guys, thank you for your time today. I'll be sticking around if you want any additional questions, any additional comments. Be happy to do it.